Subscribe for more.
I never planned to be the woman in a story people whisper about, the kind with lowered voices and sharpened judgments. I was married, settled, predictable, or at least that is how it looked from the outside. My name is Eliza Hartwell. I was 36 when everything I thought I understood about loyalty, love, and myself cracked open in a single night I still replay in my head. Marcus, my husband, was safety. He was routine. We met in our late 20s, built a life brick by brick, bought a narrow townhouse with creaky stairs and a backyard that never quite caught enough sun. He worked in logistics, I worked in marketing, and our lives ran on shared calendars and quiet dinners. Nothing was wrong enough to leave. Nothing was right enough to feel alive. Jonah Reed was my past, the person I loved before I learned how to be sensible. He was chaos in a leather jacket, all sharp smiles and unfinished sentences. We broke up years before I met Marcus. Not because we stopped caring, but because caring with Jonah felt like standing too close to a fire. You either burned or backed away. We hadn't spoken in nearly a decade when his name appeared on my phone. No apology, no explanation, just a message asking if I was still in the city and if I wanted coffee. I stared at the screen longer than I want to admit. Then I told myself it was harmless. Just coffee, just closure. I didn't tell Marcus. That omission came easily, which should have scared me. I said I was meeting an old colleague after work and kissed him goodbye like any other evening. He smiled, asked what I wanted for dinner, and reminded me he'd be home early. That smile stayed with me all night, an uninvited guest in every thought. Jonah was exactly the same and completely different. Older, calmer, but still unsettling in the way he looked at me like he saw the version of myself I'd packed away. We talked about nothing important and everything that mattered. Time slipped. Coffee turned into walking. Walking turned into sitting by the river as the city lights came on. When he reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. I told myself it was nostalgia, not intention. Memory, not desire. The lies were quiet and convincing. One step didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like drifting. By the time I realized how far I'd gone, turning back felt impossible. That night was unforgettable not because of what happened, but because of what it revealed. I wasn't reckless or wild. I was empty. I felt seen in a way I hadn't allowed myself to notice was missing. It wasn't about Jonah. It was about how easily I stepped outside the life I claimed to value. Marcus was at home, probably watching something familiar, probably assuming I was safe. That knowledge sat heavy in my chest. I checked my phone once and saw his message asking if I wanted him to save me some dinner. I didn't reply. Silence became my shield. I went home alone before midnight. No dramatic goodbye, no promises, just a quiet understanding that something irreversible had shifted. Marcus was asleep when I slipped into bed. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my body exhausted, my mind painfully awake. I waited for guilt to crush me. Instead, clarity crept in. The truth is uglier than infidelity. I didn't feel torn between two men. I felt detached from the life I was living. Jonah didn't steal me away. He held up a mirror, and I didn't like what I saw. A woman who chose comfort over honesty. A marriage held together by habit, not intimacy. Over the next weeks, I watched Marcus with new eyes. His kindness, his reliability, his quiet way of loving me. I realized how unfair it was to let him believe everything was fine while I carried this secret like a private wound. He deserved more than my silence. He deserved the truth, even if it ended us. I told him on an ordinary Sunday morning. No raised voices. No accusations, just words placed carefully between us like fragile glass. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he nodded once and said he needed time. That was worse than anger. We separated not long after. There was no dramatic fallout, no public spectacle, just two adults acknowledging that something essential had been lost long before that night. Jonah faded back into memory where he belonged. He was never the future. He was the reminder. People like simple villains and clean endings. This story has neither. I am not proud of that night, but I no longer lie about why it happened. It forced me to confront truths I was avoiding about love, about myself, about the cost of pretending. An unforgettable night is rarely about pleasure. Sometimes it is about exposure, about standing alone with the consequences of your choices and realizing you cannot unsee what you now know. Marcus is rebuilding his life without me. I am learning how to live without excuses. That is the truth that stayed when everything else faded.